his local paper in Illinois, frankly, says he once submitted a letter to the editor that cited statistics about political donations that he says he heard on this TV show, because he says he watched this TV show.
So this sick individual does something despicable, and it was horrible what he did, hateful. But for them to all of a sudden be sanctimonious, as if they never seen such a thing before. And I don't even want to go into the President of the United States, but in terms of some of the language that he has used. So again, let's go there another day. But since you asked, how could they possibly say such a thing? First of all, the timing of it all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we know there's a lot of blame to go around. We know all of it belongs on the side of the left, all of it, every last bit of every piece of violence in this country. The interaction between Nancy Pelosi, MSNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, and now Fox News, and the marginal crazies on the left is no longer to be denied. Now, here we have Nancy Pelosi comparing Donald Trump's rhetoric with the actual shooting of Republican congressmen. I could sit here all day and show you the derangement syndrome of Pelosi and the leadership, if you want to call it that, of the left. But we're way past that. The only question I have for you is this. What should nationalists now do to counter the violent Democrat left? It's as simple as that. What should the nationalists of America, of whom there are let us say millions, what should we nationalists now do to counter the violent Democrat socialist left? I have many things that I can do. One of them is broadcasting every day and exposing them for the violent individuals they are. Now, Pelosi acts as though she has nothing to do with the violence that is occurring. I'm going to play a speech for you of hers, one of many that she gave at the University of California at Berkeley 2 years ago, I think, 3 years ago, to a commencement audience. Young people going out into the world with their silly caps and gowns, finding out that they're trained for nothing, capable of nothing, going out after 5 years of learning hatred for America, hatred for family, hatred for father, hatred for church, and then finding out that they're unemployable. She spoke to them and called them, what did she call them? Disruptors. Well, here is Nancy Pelosi, who claims she has nothing to do with the violence that we are seeing in America, as she spoke to impressionable young drug addicts at the University of California at Berkeley. Let's hear it.
We're successful disruptors of the then status quo. Being called a disruptor, in my view, is a very high compliment. You here in Berkeley are already disruptors in many ways. In 1964, Mario Savio and company were disruptors of the status quo.
He was a piece of low-class garbage.
Of your possibility.
I can't listen to her anymore. I can't take it anymore. I have an interactive map put out by American Renaissance that shows, are you ready for this? The 200 acts of violence and hatred against Donald Trump supporters that have taken place since he declared his candidacy, and Nancy Pelosi, Rachel Maddow, Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper, and the entire cabal of radical leftists in the media went ballistic, smearing Trump, smearing his voters, smearing you. Anyone who voted for Trump, never forget this. When they attack Trump and call him those names, they're attacking you. They're saying you are deplorable. You are disgusting. Well, since they started in on their war, 2 homicides, 2 attempted homicides, 10 cases of arson, 26 aggravated assaults, and 75 assaults. Now we have the attempted murder of a congressman on their hands. Never forget what I'm saying to you. Words have meaning. When you call a group of kids disruptors and you celebrate being a disruptor, and then they go out there and attack police and damage property, and now one of them, a disenfranchised white man from the Middle West, who is a Democrat socialist follower of none other than the New York street agitator Bernie Sanders, the Seltzer man, and he says he has nothing to do with it, you are mistaken. Words have power. They have all been calling for violent resistance, and they're very well organized. They're more organized than the MS-13 gang. They have better funding than the MS-13 gang. By the way, President Trump's pledge to wipe out the violent MS-13 gang is gaining traction, according to the New York Post. In New York, federal officials have rounded up close to 40 accused members of MS-13 in New York City and Long Island in 30 days. Why have you not heard that success from Nancy Pelosi, Rachel Madcow, Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper, and the other members of the violent, rhetorical left? Why do they never report the good that Trump is doing? Why do they continue to steam up the marginal? Hoping what? That they go out and do something they can have on television to build up their ratings? So, I talked about this yesterday at length. I wrote an article, actually, Art Moore did of Daily, which has been on the Drudge Report for 16 hours, which means millions upon millions upon millions of people have read this article. Do you think we're alone? We're no more alone than we were when we voted for Donald Trump. We're really no more alone when they said that this outsider businessman could not win. Now, I know many of you are dissatisfied with Trump. And I won't say rightly so because it's wrongly so. It's wrongly so. I told you weren't going to get 100% of what you voted for. I told you you'd get 30% of what you voted for if you were lucky. But I'll take the First and Second Amendments if you don't mind. They would be seriously under attack right now had, God forbid, the candidate of Pelosi, Blitzer, Tapper, and the cabal on the left, had she won, the first thing she would have gone after is free speech. The second thing she would have gone after is the right to bear arms. The third thing she would have gone after is, you name it, just fill in all the amendments and you'll find out what she would have gone after. What I find astonishing is that here we had an attempted assassination on members of Congress, one of whom is fighting for his life, and already I don't have the words for it, have already dropped the story. Instead, they're talking about a bunch of goons who won a basketball game here in San Francisco, Pelosi's backyard. That's right. A group of basketball players is more to be studied by the idiots in Nancy Pelosi's backyard than the attempted assassination of Republican members of Congress. Watch the Warriors parade right here. Look at the morons with their bottles of cheap champagne. Look at them riding around with their Warriors flags. Each one of them is an Einstein for sure. That's the headline on the San Francisco newspaper. Warriors Championship Parade. Hip, hip, hooray. Now, you have to scroll down to find anything to do with the attempted assassination of a Republican group and killing almost one of them. Somewhere down on the bottom, here it is. Here it is underneath, let us see, the latest coffee for $19. Man who shot congressman was living in a van, called a loner. No connection to Bernie Sanders. No connection to being a Trump hater. You have to read the whole story to even find out who he was. And then you find no connection to Bernie Sanders. Do you know how many attempts there have been on Congress over the years? Not many. This is major news. This should be a headline for 5 days. This should be deep analysis for 5 days. This should justify editorials for 10 days. But already the radical left who own the newspapers, have dropped the story. When was the last time members of Congress, any member of Congress, was shot while in office, specifically for their politics? Do you know when? Don't say Senator Gabrielle Giffords, the Arizona. She was attacked at a meeting in Tucson that resulted in the deaths of 6 others in January of 2011. But she was not attacked for her politics. Jared Loughner was just a lunatic. The last attempted political assassination of members of Congress in the United States was in March of 1954, when a group of violent Puerto Rican nationalists attacked them with guns in the Capitol building. And Representatives Kenneth Roberts, Ben Jensen, George Fallon, Clifford Davis, and Alvin Bentley, Democrats and Republicans alike, were attacked by this group of violent Puerto Rican separatists. But there have been no attacks for political reasons since then, until now. What is my point? My point is this is major national news. It's time for a national analysis of why this is happening. It's time for the radical left not only to take stock, but to be punished for what they're doing. That means that Congress must hold a hearing immediately and call before the hearing Jeff Zucker, Phil Griffin, and the other leaders of the pack of instigators and ask them, do you want to be censored by Congress and by the government, or will you self-censor and control the rabid mad dogs on your networks? Because I'm telling you it's going to happen whether you want it to happen or not. The mad dogs of the left, especially those on CNN and MSNBC, must be muzzled. And unless they self-muzzle, unless Zucker and Phil Griffin get them under control, Congress has to act. Now, I'm not saying that my words are going to lead to action, but everything begins with an idea. Just as the idea of being a disruptor led to the shooting, just as the idea of resistance leads to violence and shooting, well, my call for a new HUAC, House of Un-American Activities Committee, as published in Trump's War, listing the subversive groups operating with impunity in this nation, while it has not yet led to a new HUAC, I am hopeful it will. I'm hopeful that once Trump and his team beat back the cockroaches, smearing him with false allegations, exposing Mueller for what he actually is. Look at Mueller's background. Don't get me started on this Eagle Scout. Another Eagle Scout of the FBI, Bob Mueller. Ask Bob Mueller, the clean Boy Scout, where are the papers of the Solyndra bankruptcy that he seized while he was the head of the FBI? Where did those papers go? Who stole the $500 million? Which congresswomen, which senators stole the $500 million? How much money got kicked up to them or their immediate relatives? Where is that paperwork that he seized right after Solyndra declared bankruptcy with that phony green activity? The answer is nowhere to be found. They shredded it. And I said to you before, and I'll say it again, Trump needs a Roy Cohn. He hired one. But Roy Cohn, the tough lawyer, is not enough. Roy Cohn needs to hire 100 young, zealous lawyers. 100 young, zealous lawyers, and put 10 of them on every one of the enemies of Donald Trump. Not smear them the way they're smearing Trump, but expose them for what they're actually doing and what they've actually done. Find out what contracts they may have steered to friends and relatives. Find out how they went from being relatively middle class to super wealthy while in Congress. Find out how they made hundreds of millions of dollars while in Congress while only earning $160,000 a year or so. How did they become almost billionaires? Where'd the money come from? These are questions that must be answered if we're to have a democracy of any semblance whatsoever. Now, I'm no baby. I told you I grew up as a cynic because my immigrant father was very cynical about the American system. He held my hand and we walked down the streets and he said, Michael, let me tell you how the system works here. There's two gangs of thieves, the Democrat thieves and the Republican thieves. And he said, when one gang wins, the other gang sits there pointing fingers and saying, look what they did, look what they did, look what they did. Then when the next gang is given the power, and notice he said given the power, they say, look what they did, look what they did, look what they did. And they hold committee hearings, and they try to rip the other one down. Meanwhile, people are killed. Meanwhile, animals are being slaughtered. Meanwhile, the whales are being decimated because you're doing nothing, all you good environmentalists. Meanwhile, the African element is being driven to extinction because of Nancy Pelosi's stupidity and ignorance. When have you last heard a hearing about the endangered species on the planet from any of these caring Democrats who care so much about carbon? I care more about elephants and whales than I do about the myth of carbon dioxide. I have a lot more to say on this day on the Savage Nation. Are you afraid of the coming civil war? Who do you fear the most? Who do you think is most responsible for the violence in America? This is the Savage Nation. I'll be back.
Join the Savage Nation.
Do you want me to keep naming the names? Do you think they're actually going to change? When I woke up today and saw that Pelosi was ripping into Republicans for criticizing the left wing and their rhetoric before the shooting, and she got up there and said, how dare they say that we had anything to do with it? I said, this is hopeless. But we can't stop fighting them. We have to expose them over and over and over again. So I played for you Pelosi steaming up a crowd of young idiots at UC Berkeley during a commencement exercise 3 years ago, calling them disruptors and celebrating their disruption. That's all I can do for you. I can't do anymore. I am not a politician. I have no power. I am only a talk show host, which is a man with an opinion. You realize that that's it? You know what we are? There used to be, I think it's called something without portfolio in the English system. Member of Parliament without portfolio, whatever they call it. We really are politicians in talk radio, all of us, left, right, center. No matter whether we agree, think we are or not, we are politicians, all of us. Member without portfolio. We have no portfolio. We have no position in Congress, but we are very, very, very influential in our own way. And I take that as a great honor and a great responsibility, and I hope you will as well, by calling the show at 855-407-282. And what I want you to do is call the show on this topic or any other topic that you'd like me to talk about. I'm ready to shift. I can shift on a dime, and I intend to do so. If you want me to get off politics and you want me to do one of the other things I'm known for doing or can do to entertain you, to educate you, you want me to talk about food, I can do that. You want me to talk about ethnic cuisines, I can do that. You want me to talk about diet and health, I can do that. You want me to talk about health issues, I can do that. You want me to talk about environmental issues, I can do that. Whatever you want me to talk about, I'll be glad to do right here on the Savage Nation. Phone number is 855-407-282. By the way, you want me to talk about the dangers of marijuana? I'll do that. You want me to talk about why marijuana is infecting the minds of the youth and who was behind it? And I'll show you George Soros's handwriting all over this subject of, quote, medical marijuana and how he knew that if he could dope up enough millions of people, he could get away with even more of his socialist madness. I'll do that for you if you want. Whatever you want, I'm here for you. Be here or be nowhere.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-4.
That's the sound of the rifle used by the Bernie Sanders supporter, the MSNBC viewer, as he assaulted Republican congressman yesterday on the ball field. I wanted you to hear the sound of the rifle because it's shocking. You know, a rifle makes a lot of noise. Guns make a lot of noise. That was an SKS 7.62 assault rifle, the same gun used in the Dallas ambush of police, where many police were killed. The same horrible gun. You know, it's not guns that kill. It's people who kill who use guns. But I will remind you that it was a gun that stopped this piece of garbage before he killed everyone. And I also want you to think that if more people on that field, if any of the congressmen or their aides had guns, he wouldn't have been able to shoot at them for 10 straight minutes. He would have been stopped earlier. Think about that one. Think about that one. Now, we hear that Charles Schumer is a good liberal. We hear that Charles Schumer loves the poor. We hear that Charles Schumer is for the downtrodden. We hear that Charles Schumer hates millionaires and who's this, Chuck Todd? A faker. Chuck Todd was never anything. The guy was a 10th rate intellect, if you even want to apply the word intellect. They gave him a beard. Remember he didn't sell in the beginning? They gave him a goatee. Then all of a sudden he became a great spokesman. Now he's blaming everybody for what happened. He's not blaming himself for what he's been doing, just as Macho Red Cow won't take responsibility for what she's done. Just as Pelosi ripped into Republicans for criticizing left-wing rhetoric before the shooting. How dare they, she said. And she became the victim all of a sudden. Now, I predicted there would be violence. I said we're at a boiling point the day before it happened. And then yesterday I played people like Tim Kaine who called for fighting in the streets. I didn't yet play Loretta Lynch. Remember her, that piece of work that Al Sharpton gave us as Attorney General? Do you remember that? A woman as unqualified as her was once the Attorney General of the United States of America. Wasn't that what she was, Jim? Wasn't she AG? Right. A lawyer from New York who they made into a judge. Then they made her Attorney General. She called on fellow progressives to march, bleed, and die in the streets. You got to hear clip number 4 right now on the Savage Nation, please.
I know that this is a time of great fear and uncertainty for so many people. I know it's a time of concern for people who see our rights being assailed, being trampled on, and even being rolled back.
You're right.
I know that this is difficult, but I remind you that this has never been easy. We have always had to work to move this country forward to achieve the great ideals of our founding fathers.
Forward, that's a great word.
Individuals who have banded together, ordinary people who simply saw what needed to be done and came together and supported those ideals, who have made the difference. They've marched, they've bled. Yes, some of them have died. This is hard. Every good thing is. We have done this before, we can do this again.
What she means is she can cause another revolution in America, her and Al Sharpton. He picked her, by the way, according to my studies. It was Al Sharpton who went in and out of the White House. I don't know how they cleaned it out after that, but if I'm ever invited into the White House, the first question I ask the president's staff is, show me which bedroom Al Sharpton slept in, and make sure you don't put me in that room. Unless you could show me video of that room being taken down to the studs, new sidewall, new insulation, new paint, I'm not going in that room, because I believe in vibes, my friend. So she calls on fellow progressives to march, bleed, and die in the streets, but she had nothing to do with what happened. Pelosi, nothing to do with what happened. She's been the target of more threats than anyone, poor old Pelosi. I don't want to focus on her because it's becoming apparent to me something's wrong there. Yesterday, when she gave that speech about the Italian thing, I couldn't know what I was listening to. Did you hear that speech at Pelosi after the shooting, where she slipped into the Italian connection? I didn't know what she was talking about. I'm only playing it because I love Italian people. I've gotten along with them all my life. I don't understand what she means when she says that. Well, listen to clip 6.
We are not one caucus or the other in this House today, but we speak for each other in saying that we send our thoughts and prayers to our colleague, Steve Scalise. Personally, we have our Italian-American connection, so as soon as I heard his name, I was filled with concern, as I would be for anyone here, but we have that special connection, so our hopes and prayers. And I said to the Speaker, I'll be asking you every 5 minutes.
Wait a minute, stop. What do you mean the special connection? What is she talking about? When do you say to a congresswoman or a senator, ma'am, it's time to go? They take driver's licenses away from people at a certain point when they start having too many accidents. If you have too many verbal accidents and you're in Congress, when do they remove you? When? Is there an amendment that applies to Congress? They've been saying Trump should be removed under the 25th. One schmuck came up with that one, and they all started mimeographing it around. Robert Reich, I've decided in my great deliberations, although my feet do not touch the ground, nor does my brain touch a book, in these days, I have decided in my intimate wisdom that the 25th Amendment should be enacted and Donald Trump should be removed immediately for mental incompetence. 10 of them said it in one day. No, there's no sharing of... does that apply to a congressperson who makes statements like, I don't understand. When do you remove them? When? Doesn't her own party understand that she's wrecking their party?